December 1944, the Third Reich is collapsing. Hitler's desperate gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, has failed, and German cities burn under Allied bombs. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe's skies, is a shadow of its former self. But among its ranks are still men of extraordinary skill. One of them is Hans Werner Lerche, Germany's top test pilot. Born in 1914 and flying since before the war began, he has tested everything from the Messerschmitt Bf 109 to the revolutionary Me-260 to jet fighter. On a freezing morning, December 14, 1944, Lerche takes off for what should have been a routine test flight in ABF 109, but midway through the mission, disaster strikes. The engine sputters, then dies. Some believe it was sabotage. Germany's war industry was collapsing. Forced laborers sometimes sabotaged machines, and poor materials made failures common. Whatever the cause, Lerche is left gliding over enemy territory with a dead engine. He faces a decision that will alter history. He could try to glide back to German lines or bail out over friendly territory. Instead, he banks west toward American lines. Later, he would claim he didn't want to risk civilian lives by crash landing in a German town. At least, he reasoned. The Americans follow the Geneva Convention. When American troops reach the crash site, they find a nearly intact German test aircraft and a living Luftwaffe pilot calmly waiting beside it. The man's name would soon become legendary in aviation circles. Standard U.S. Army protocol dictated that captured pilots be interrogated, then sent to POW camps. But when intelligence officers learned who they'd caught, everything changed. Hans Lerche wasn't an ordinary pilot. He was Germany's most experienced test aviator. The Americans realized he could hold secrets that might shorten the war. Lieutenant Colonel Harold Watson, one of America's top test pilots stationed at Wright Field, Ohio, was assigned to question him. Watson had been evaluating captured German aircraft since 1943, trying to decode their design philosophies. When he met Lerche, he immediately sensed this was no ordinary debriefing. Their initial interrogation, scheduled for 72 hours, stretched into 21 days. It was one of the most fascinating conversations of my career. Watson later wrote, Lerche spoke with precision about German engines, doctrines, and the logic behind their aircraft designs. He could explain not only how planes performed but why they were built that way. Then Watson proposed an unthinkable idea. What if we let him evaluate our aircraft? The suggestion shocked his superiors. Letting a German pilot fly American fighters was a direct violation of every wartime security protocol. But Watson persisted, and after weeks of debate, the Pentagon authorized an unprecedented decision. Operation Lusty's secret component, a classified agreement allowing Lerche to test fly American planes under strict conditions. He would remain a POW but live comfortably. At Wright Field, he would fly only aircraft the Germans already knew. All flights would be monitored. And crucially, he had to volunteer. No coercion. When Watson presented the offer, Lerche sat in silence for 10 long minutes before replying, I have conditions of my own. Lerche's conditions were simple but revealing. First, he would not fly missions that directly harmed German forces. Second, his evaluations would be honest. Third, after the war, he wanted help immigrating to America. The Pentagon debated and, astonishingly, agreed. On March 15, 1945, at Wright Field, Hans Lerche walked toward a P-51 Mustang, the aircraft that had shattered Germany's air defenses. The irony was thick. A German ace climbing into the cockpit of the plane that had destroyed his comrades. American crews watched nervously as he strapped in. For Lerche, though, the Mustang was a masterpiece, sleek, balanced, meticulously engineered. The ground crew's professionalism amazed him. Your engineers, he told Watson afterward, have solved problems we didn't even know we had. Over the next weeks, Lerche tested almost every major American fighter, the P-47 Thunderbolt, the P-38 Lightning, even the early P-80 Shooting Star jet. Each flight was supervised, each insight carefully recorded. His observations stunned American pilots. When flying the Thunderbolt, he explained why. Germans struggled against it. Our fighters are for short-range interception. Yours are built for endurance. Your pilots can fight when ours must turn home. Declassified decades later, one shocking revelation emerged. Lerche's engine failure back in Germany had not been an accident. He had sabotaged his own plane to defect. The Americans had known from day one and played along. What had seemed a coincidence was a calculated act of defection by a man who saw the end coming. Despite the security risks, cooperation flourished. The American pilots, initially wary, grew to respect their German counterpart. Watson himself later wrote, I expected a Nazi fanatic. Instead, I met a consummate professional. The two men spent long hours after flights discussing design philosophies, fuel efficiency, and the future of jet propulsion. Lerche, too, underwent a transformation. Nazi propaganda had painted Americans as soft and undisciplined. But what he saw at Wright Field contradicted everything he'd been told. Their engineers were better, their tools precise, their procedures exact, he recalled in his memoirs. It was humbling. The friendships that developed in those hangars transcended the war itself. To Lerche, flying was not political, it was a science, an art, and now he was surrounded by men who shared that obsession. As Germany fell and Berlin burned, the test flights continued. On May 8, 1945, Germany officially surrendered. Lerche's homeland was gone, but his purpose remained. His position now became uncertain. No longer a prisoner of war, but not yet free, he was valuable. He had flown Soviet aircraft before and understood their strengths. With Cold War tensions rising, the U.S. needed that knowledge. Watson and his superiors quietly made him an offer that would have been unimaginable months earlier. A permanent civilian position with the U.S. Air Force. After all, Watson wrote, "This man has skills we need. We'd be fools to send him away." In December 1945, 1 year after his defection, Hans Lerche accepted a contract as a civilian test pilot. For the U.S. Air Force, he worked at Wright Field until 1950, evaluating new aircraft designs as America transitioned into the jet age. His technical insights shaped post-war aviation: how wings should flex under stress, how pilots could handle higher speeds, how manufacturing consistency changed everything. When Lerche eventually returned to Germany, he helped rebuild its aviation industry from scratch. But the impact of his American years endured. His evaluations directly influenced U.S. pilot training during the Korean War and informed engineering principles for decades. In both nations, his name became synonymous with precision and courage in flight. Yet the full truth stayed buried. For 33 years, his file remained locked above top secret. When declassified in 1978, historians discovered the bombshell. Lerche's recruitment was not an isolated case. His cooperation had been the prototype for Operation Paperclip, the sweeping U.S. initiative that brought over 200 German scientists, engineers, and aviators, including rocket pioneer Wernher von Braun, to work for America. Lerche's success proved that collaboration between former enemies was possible, even beneficial. By the 1970s, Hans Lerche was a legend. He had flown virtually every significant post-war aircraft on both sides of the Iron Curtain. To some, he was a hero of science. To others, a man who had crossed too many lines. But those who knew him, including Watson, saw something deeper. Hans showed that integrity and skill can outlast nations.